So failure is pretty interesting, right? Because we're going to dive into what failure is, what it looks like, and really dive into what it looks like in your mind. And so first, I wanted to present this model right here. And it simply shows how how failure works, but not just that, but how your thoughts influence your emotions and your reactions. Right. So if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, in the middle, it says activating events, right? These are activating events are simply things that happen to you that cause you to think. So activating events happen every day. Probably most of you, your first activating event of the day is your alarm clock goes off, right? You might hit traffic, you might baseball, you might strike out, or you might make an error. There's all sorts of different types of activating events. They're not negative or positive. That really depends on your thoughts, which we'll get into. And so in this example we wanted to share was, let's say the example activating event is that you strike out. So from there, you have your thoughts. And your thoughts are extremely important because it's through your thoughts that determine or drive or influence your emotions and your reactions. So our example here, after you strike out, you might have the thought of my hands feel slow. And from that thought, it elicits or drives the emotion of frustration. Right? And from that thought and emotion, you'll have the reaction, for example, here of throwing your helmet down on the ground. Right? So whenever like a kid, player, so on here, we have coaches, we have players, we have everything in between. When you're throwing your helmet, recognizing and separating the fact that it's not the activating event of striking out that is causing you to throw your helmet. And it's not the activating event of striking out that's creating this frustration. And recognizing that it's actually the way that you're thinking, right? So frustration and anger and all these different types of emotions, they don't come from activating events. And that's something that people, like when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. But oftentimes it's really difficult to separate it because you're like, oh, it's because of this thing that happened to me that I ended up feeling this frustration or whatever, right? But recognizing that it's through your thinking that influences and drives these emotions and this reaction. And so there's actually, it's really interesting. There's a Buddhist proverb about something called the second arrow, or it's a Buddhist metaphor. So Adam's going to share, press play on this clip here in just a second. And so as you watch the video, pay attention to what the second arrow is. Okay, and why there's a second arrow. So this video that you're gonna watch, it's a great example of this idea that we're talking about. So Adam, go ahead and play it.
You know when something bad happens, then you blame yourself? That's two arrows. Let me explain. The first arrow represents a negative experience, like tripping and dropping your tray on the lunchroom floor. This pain caused by the first arrow happens to everyone throughout life. No one is perfect. However, if you react super negatively to the bad experience, becoming upset or angry, blaming or complaining, you set off the suffering of the second arrow. But the pain of the second arrow can be a choice. While you can't control your circumstances, you can choose how you will react and choose not to react in a way that continues the hurt from the first arrow. So the next time something stressful happens, remember not to shoot the second arrow, and instead change to chill.
All right, thank you, Adam. So if you notice, the second arrow is really what we're talking about, right? So the first arrow would be like the activating event, the bad thing that happens to you, right? But the second arrow oftentimes is like the real arrow that stops people. Like in battle, it's the second shot often that's really the one that keeps people from moving forward, is the emotion, right? It's the thoughts, or your thoughts, that create those emotions that are really harmful. So when it comes to responding to failure, sometimes we think we don't have a choice, right? You don't think that oh, I'm just going to get angry, right? And I think there's a certain element of, we train ourselves how to think, right? And sometimes it is due to different experiences that we have, but really it's difficult to control that first thought, right? When you strike out, that first thought that you have, because you put a lot of energy and practice and time into excelling at your craft, right? And getting really good. And so when you strike out, sometimes that initial thought is difficult to control, right? But the key is to control that second, third, fourth, fifth thought, right? And that's where we take control. So this concept that we're talking about it's nothing new, right? It's not like this foreign idea, that because we've all experienced this all the time. But to be really deliberate in the way that we think. So how to respond to failure, we really do have a choice. So Adam, if you want to go to the next slide. This is a we have the same example, right? Activating event is you strike out, right? You might have that first thought where you're really frustrated because your thought is, my hands feel slow, but then you change it, right? You change the course of your thinking, right? So instead of letting it go down this dark path where it will be harmful, as you start to go down that path of thought, make a turn with a thought like this: I'll get him next time, right? And the reason it's important is because what are the emotions that come from that type of thinking? It's determined, right? You know you're going to get a hit next time. And your reaction is your head is held high, right? So you're changing the trajectory of your thinking through purposely having thoughts that will help you get there. So this concept, it is powerful stuff. Now, I'll tell you this. Not all negative thinking has negative outcomes, right? For example, there might be some players who might say to themselves, like for me, I'm Andy, right? So you might, like myself, I'm like, Andy, you're an idiot, right? But then what's that do? It helps me get refocused. It helps me get to that determined. So the thinking that we have, we want to be really deliberate when things aren't going our way, right? What do I need to say to myself to get to the desired emotions and reaction, right? So sorry, getting a little tongue-tied. The desired emotion that we want is, we want to feel determined, right? We want to feel strong. We want to feel like we can accomplish it next, or get a hit next time we go and hit, right? So what is a thought that will help you get there? And I often, I work with the Army, right? And I like to tell them sometimes, like, hey, the only reason I care about your feelings is because it heavily influences your reactions, right? So what you do. So in regards to players, it's the same thing, right? We want those desired emotions, and how do we get them? It's through our thinking. So having pre-planned thoughts is extremely valuable to help us overcome whatever emotion. It's really pretty awesome stuff, how we can really take hold of it. So I want to talk a little bit more about how to respond to failure. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide.
Before you move on, I just want to make the point, like, you look at the two images of, Brett Gardner about to slam his helmet. And I think one time he actually got stitches. I shouldn't be laughing. I mean, that's not really funny, but he slammed his helmet. It came up and hit him in the face and got stitches. But then you look at the response of like Christian Yelich. This is him walking away from a strikeout, like kind of keeping it. You could just see his body language, the difference there. And you know what, like, I look at Brett Gardner, that's his outlet. That's how he responds to it, right? Like, but he has tools that back that up. He's familiar with it because it gets him back to level. But as a young player watching that, that's not okay because they're not quite there yet, They haven't failed as much as Brett Gardner, right? I'm not saying it's just his way of letting it out. But for me, like, look at Christian Yelich. That's just strong, right? I'll get him next time, kind of determined mentality. Andy, I just wanted to add that really quick.
Yeah, I'm really happy you said that too, because the key for any player is to have strategies to help them overcome the failure, right? And so for some kids, maybe, I hate to say it, but for some kids, maybe throwing the helmet will help them release it. And then next time they go and hit, or right when they enter the field, it's gone. It's like it enables them to move forward, right? Now, I think 99% of youth players, that's not going to be the case, right? But understanding that there are different strategies. So instead of throwing the helmet, maybe it could be him going and pushing his fists together, really hard, right? Or doing something to help him release that frustration. But the key is understanding the player so that you are able to overcome it, right? If doing something like that only harms you, then no, that's not gonna be helpful. But if it helps a young player to do something to release it, then yes, it's I would argue that, hey, maybe that's something that they need to figure out a way to release that. Which is interesting, right?
It is, but it's hard because young players, they should just be having fun though, right? It's kind of hard to see what is really on the line for a young player. Is it just all the pressure from their parents, or why would they even do that? It should just be fun though. How could that? Why can't they just? You know what I mean?
100%, and that brings up a whole new point, right? Like how do we? Should kids be experiencing that much pressure, right? And how do you deal with that pressure? Which I'm sure we could talk about for a long time another time, but which maybe that'll be our next webinar. I think that's a good question though, Adam.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it as after this little presentation. We'll open it up for discussion. I'm sure we'll hit on that a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so Andy, you want to move on?
Yeah. So there's different ways, or there's basically touching on other ways to respond. So if you want to, there we go. So understand that your thoughts control your emotions and your reactions, right? Understand that when you're feeling a specific way, when you're feeling anger, when you're feeling frustration, where does that come from? It comes from the way that you're thinking, right? Because there's sometimes players, they have the same activating event, they strike out, but yet sometimes they walk off the field like, I'm going to get them next time. And other times they get frustrated. So what's the difference? It's how they're thinking. The next component is control the controllables, right? So after a strikeout or after an error, it's no longer in our control. Obviously, not letting that happen again is always in our control, but what's in the past is in the past. So learn from it, Figure out what you need to do not to let that error, not to strike out again, and then move forward. The other portion is having confidence and compassion for yourself. And there's kind of two components here, right? Confidence, such a fascinating topic as well, right? Because it comes from so many different areas. We all know young players that are really good, but lack confidence. And I'm sure you know some players that are not that good, but have all the confidence in the world. What's the difference? It comes from the way that they're thinking. And then also to have compassion for yourself, right? Like treat yourself like you are your best friend. And I think a lot of people, if their friend treated them the way that they treated themselves in their mind, they wouldn't have a lot of friends. Like you'd be like, dude, I don't want that guy around me, like, or girl, like, because we're oftentimes we're really mean to ourselves, and we forget that we need to be good to ourselves, and that also helps us to build confidence, control the controllables, and create emotion that will be helpful versus harmful. It's fascinating thinking about how we treat ourselves, and the way to treat ourselves is to have compassion to ourselves and be your own best friend and be your own hype man. In other words,
that's not easy to do at all,
No.
by any means. But before we move on, Todd, I got your deck of cards. I went through them, and as we were going through this presentation, I thought about like the emotions, right? It says command the controllables. I'm not sure if you want to put it in the link, like if anybody's interested in getting these like little flashcards. They're awesome. Really appreciate you sending those to me.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, those are great though, Andy. Appreciate that. And we'll just move. Andy, you ready to move on?
Yeah.
All right. Well, a couple of you guys recognize this guy. This is Andy Green. He's the bench coach for the Chicago Cubs right now. Now, Greeny was somebody that huge influence on me that helped me overcome failure. Right back in 2008, I was struggling hitting a $180 in Louisville, Kentucky. I was so close to breaking into the big leagues, and Greeny pulled me aside as like a veteran ball player, and just out of respect said, "Hey, Rosie, you play a lot better than the way you're playing right now." But he's like, you could tell by the way your body language, you got to change that. You got to just act more confident. You got to act more confident is what he told me. And I started doing that along with many other things that went with it. But that stood out to me when Greeny told me that, like how I am responding to how I'm failing. And I went off. I hit 400 2 months in a row, and I got called up to the major leagues for the first time. But what's special about this story is that about 8 years later, 2016, Andy Green is now the manager for the San Diego Padres. And it is June again, and I'm hitting a $180 again in June. I don't know how they kept me in the major leagues, to be honest with you, but really struggling, failing big time. And it was like right around All-Star break. I went up to him next to the turtle, they call it, like right by home plate during batting practice. And I said, "Greeny, what do you got for me?" And he says, Rose, almost the same exact conversation. He says, "We know how much you care. You don't have to show it." He's like, "I want you, every time you get out, I want you to keep your head held high and run back to the dugout like you usually do." Because I would get I'd run down the baseline and I would kind of sulk coming back to the dugout, and he recognized that. So he called me out on that, and I started like I wouldn't let that second arrow hit me, or I wouldn't shoot that second arrow, however you want to say it. That's how I started overcoming failure. is that the way my body language was something so simple like that helped me become more compassionate to myself. So I credit Grinny a ton for that. And it's just a remarkable story how it paralleled from 2008 to 2016. But again, there's a lot of other factors that go into it, but he was a big influence on my whole career. Andy, do you want to touch on the strategies to overcome failure?
Yeah, and this reminds me of a conversation Adam and I had the other day, how sometimes like pretending to be somebody that's successful is a really good strategy to help you become successful, right? So I remember, Adam, you were talking about another player that was just really successful. You're like, oh man, I kind of started acting like him as a strategy to overcome it.
Yeah, I didn't like act like, I mean, I saw like his body, I guess it was more like body language, or like kind of like, it was Manny Ramirez. Everybody knows, but I'm like, look how like easy the game is to him. And like, I almost try to like start acting easy about it. Is what I did. Like, it was my rookie year in Billings, Montana, if that's the story you talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I bring that up because it's 100% a strategy, right? Is sometimes like if you're finding yourself like struggling, to pretend to be somebody that isn't struggling, and it helps you get out of it, right? And I'm not saying like this weird, like I've become this other person, but you look at them as an example of how to act, and it becomes really valuable. So there's a million different strategies that you can use to overcome failure. And I'm sure many of the coaches on this call could tell us, 25 each. But some of the main topics that we wanted to bring up are your personal experience, right? So you have a bad game or even a bad few games, but to remember either what you were doing when you were successful, right? Or to remember like, hey, my own personal experience, I have been successful before, therefore I can do it again, right? And not get lost in the moment of right now, but to rely, or not rely, but to recognize that you've been successful before. Another way is through vicarious experience, right? Hey, that guy or my teammate over there was successful, therefore I can be successful too, right? Because maybe you don't have personal experience against this really good pitcher coming up, but a player did, right? Or one of your teammates did. Let's say like maybe one of your teammates wasn't successful, right? Then you come back to your own personal experience. Another one is persuasion from other people, right? So letting your teammates help you out, right? So when they say, hey, you got this, believe in yourself that you got this, right? And again, that all comes down to it's different ways of thinking. Another way is relying on your physical ability, right? So maybe you're going up as a pitcher that is really good. He struck out the last 5 guys and you're up. And you know that, hey, I've been practicing my whole life. I can hit this guy, right? I can get a hit off this guy, right? And you can do it because you're physically fit. You know that your body can do it. It's just a matter of doing it. And another way is to prime yourself, right? Prime yourself for that opportunity. Now this one's really special, and it also takes a lot of deliberate practice, because you have to learn to prime yourself for those opportunities or for those challenges long beforehand, right? You got to take time to prepare for that guy who in high school throws 93 miles an hour, right? So you prepare yourself mentally to rise to that challenge and to see the ball and to get ahead. So these are a number of different types of thinking to help you overcome the strategy or overcome the failure. But again, there's so much within all of this, and again, so many more strategies. So the key is to find out what works best for you, and that just takes experience, right? That takes practicing overcoming failure over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear as we open up the discussion really soon here about other people's strategies, right? These are just kind of like the ones we thought of as we brainstormed what we wanted to talk about. But there are a couple of comments in the chat box. Ryan Lavarnway says, "Fake it till you make it." Like, I love it, right? I mean, I've done that. I think that was my whole career. Is because it's not easy. It's grindy, you know, and you have such a long way to go in the season. Like, it's April. How are you you can't even start thinking about June yet, and you still got to play through September. You got to find a way to fake it or use a different personal experience, like you said, Andy. And then Tim, you said, like, how would I step into the box or breathe or carry yourself on the field if you were extremely confident and relaxed? It's a good strategy to put yourself in it before it happens, right? And that's a sense of priming yourself too, I feel like. And we're actually going to talk about that right now, because that's what we do with the mindful player. That's exactly what we want to do. That is the bridge to confidence, is teaching these young players, teaching our youth how to prime themselves, and not just in their sport, but this goes on and off the field too. And it takes them further in life from my personal experience. But a lot of you are familiar with this from the last session that we did. But these are like, when we prime ourselves, these are what we do. When we talk about having that plate approach, that compete approach, or that compete routine, is having that reset, that mindful breath, that focus cue, and that mindful courage. I'm going to play you guys a quick audio file of what we're doing with Mindful Player, just to see like what these young players that we have right now, they do it on their own, whether it's like they hit off a tee, but this is just an example of how they can prime themselves. So it's just 2 minutes or a minute and a half.
All right, here's the situation. You're 0 for 10, you're starting to press, and you're facing a pro prospect. All right, we get it. This is going to be a good challenge, and that's okay. Reset and get yourself back to the present moment. Take a mindful breath. Focus cue. Have courage to trust your focus cue and envision the pitcher's release point. All right, when you're ready, take a swing. Now let's practice a few more. Ready? Here we go. You know the situation. You're 0 for 10, you're starting to press, and you're facing a pro prospect. Now, reset by doing something that brings you back to the present moment. Take a mindful breath. Focus cue. Trust your focus cue and envision the pitcher's release point. All right, whenever you're ready, take a swing. Very nice. Are you still visualizing your approach on every pitch?
So that's what we have these young players doing right now, just to prime themselves. It's just one way to overcome their failure. You know, we put them in the situation where you haven't got a hit in 10 at bats. That's a tough situation to be in. And how to get over that is you got to get back to your process, right? Ronnie, are you on? I think Ronnie Ortegon, you.
Yes, I'm on.
Hey, man.
How are you?
Did you want to add anything to that? I know you just got you were a little late, but
Yeah, no
wanna add
problem. Yeah, I
anything?
think, I think the biggest thing with failure is I think too many times kids go through the idea that if they have a game where they failed, they feel like they're a failure. And in reality, it was just a failing moment, and I think too many times we lump everything together, especially when we're struggling, and the words that we use, why am I always swinging that ball up in the zone? Why am I always chasing the ball in the dirt? And I think we need to really understand as coaches to help players is, okay, let's take each at bat and each pitch for what it's worth, and really assess where we're at with that. And I think that would help a lot of kids. But it's just like the whole idea, and I've heard this for years and years, you're having a bad day. Well, no, you just had a bad moment. And for me, failure is the same way. You're not a failure just because you had a bad day. It's just one of those days. And, in this game, we're going to fail a lot more than we succeed. So being able to accept it, you don't have to like it, but just accept the fact that you're going to struggle at times, and you go with it. So, and one of the greatest stories that I can tell is I remember Joey Votto always talked about the fact that he loved it when he struggled. And everybody thought he was crazy, but he goes, it just makes me work harder because I'm always one swing or I'm one thought away from getting back on track. So it's a challenge in itself. And he said, every time I go through a struggle, I'm trying to minimize it by the next time I go through it. Because it's not if we struggle, it's going to be when we struggle. And the more prepared we are to be able to deal with that failure, I think the better off we're going to be.
Right. Thank you, Ronnie. It's awesome, man. And but like from me, my perspective, like of being a coach now, like going from playing to being a coach, like when you're playing, it's tough to leave it at the field sometimes. Like that failure, it's almost impossible sometimes to just let it go. But as a coach, it's kind of almost like it's a you don't have any attachment to the failure. Like you feel for them, but you don't have like that aching, like you're in the like it was your failure, but you try to build them up. That's the touch points. I know a lot of people talk about the touch points when you're working with players. That's what I try to do every day. I try to go talk to everybody. I make sure I know their first name, their last name, and where they're from, and just have a conversation just so they can talk to me. Because I know how difficult it is. Even though I don't have to bring it home with me, I know that they do. And I truly care about them and what they're feeling. But anyway, so we'll move on. I don't know if somebody was going to say something, but this is what we do for the young players. We do these virtual trainings. Ronnie or Andy, if you want to put that in the chat box, if you guys want to share that with anybody, it was awesome. We had a great time. See, they just hit off the tee. We walk them through it. Kind of just a lot of positive reinforcement. We put them in those situations. Tim, I think you said the audio recording that we just went through was like low. So I'm not sure if the audio wasn't turned up, but we just basically walk them through a situation. But the coolest thing is like slowing them down so they don't just rush through their work, and we kind of just coach them through it. But if anybody is interested, that'd be great.
I'll go.
You'll go. Austin said you'll go.
Yeah.
Let's go, Austin. We'll do it tomorrow, man. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, really?
Okay. With that said, let's open it up. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you guys. What are some of because there's a lot of athletes, a lot of former players or former athletes that have been through failing situations before, and how have they overcome those situations? What are your strategies? If anybody has anybody wants to.
Here, I'll answer.
All right, Austin, go ahead, bud.
So I remember one game, I'm pretty sure Coach Ronnie was there too. I wasn't doing too hot at second, and I came back from a strikeout, and we ended up in the end winning that game. And then I knew the next game, my dad just took me out and he said, Austin, just relax and just say you got the next one. And the next game, when he said that to me, it was kind of like when I said that, I just said, okay, this pitch is coming. I'm just gonna whack at it, and I hit it into. This was either the second or the third game. I don't remember, but I just hit it into outfield, which I'm pretty happy about because I don't hit it into the outfield a lot. And also I got like 7 outs at second, so that was also pretty good.
That's fantastic, Austin. That's I like how you said it might not even been a hit that went out there, but you said you hit it to the outfield. Like you saw like it was a progression that you got better, right?
Yeah, because I'm probably one of the smallest ones on the team, but as long as I get them base hits, it really doesn't matter.
That's right.
Uh,
Love it, man.
Do that.
That's powerful, man. It reminds me of like kind of what your dad did for you. Obviously, my dad was a huge influence on me as well. But I think about you hear the story about Anthony Rizzo's dad, right? How he would always Anthony Rizzo's he's the first baseman for the Chicago Cubs. And his dad, like no
Okay.
matter if they had a good game or bad game, they would always go get Dairy Queen or something after the game. Like it was okay. There was no like quiet, like I'm upset at you or like I can't believe you did this or that. Like, but it's
Yeah, we
always
got
kind of like
Whataburger.
an enjoyable,
hmm
memorable moment for a father and his young athlete, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good, man.
Okay.
Austin, thanks so much for sharing. I know it's a tough act to follow with Austin, but if anybody else wants to share a time of any kind of situation they went through or what strategies they use to overcome failure.
I can share.
Hey, Micah.
Hey, Mika.
Sorry.
So my example is not baseball related, so you'll have to bear with me.
No, this is great. Yeah.
But I swam open water swimming and I trained for the '08 Olympics. And my biggest failure or perceived failure was not making it. And I felt like such a huge sense of shame and failure that I just internalized and suppressed. So Andy, I was super excited when you acknowledged compassion, because for me, although it took me a long time to get there, that was the key that gave me that space to let it go. Because I think a lot of times you hear that like, oh, let it go, you know, make a mistake and then let it go. But how do you do that? It's really hard. And
Yeah.
for me, the compassion part, like giving myself a little time to be like, okay, like everybody makes mistakes. This is a completely normal thing. And I'm going to show myself a little bit of compassion and kindness rather than completely, you know, annihilating myself for every time I make a mistake.
That's great. Mika, thank you so much. I don't know, and that makes me think like when you give yourself compassion, it almost like it gives yourself that time, like you said, Mika. Like, and that is essential, like that space between whether it's between at bat or competition to competition. It's that space that you create. I always said it in Spanish. I always told myself, yo tengo tiempo. Like when I was really struggling, I don't know why. I'd always say stuff in Spanish when I was having a tough time. Like I would say calmado, which means be like calm, right? Like, and just thinking about time, Mika, or the compassion you have. I just want to add that it creates that time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I got a little something, Rosie.
Yeah, size. Yeah.
All right. And again, I guess it might have been listed on the strategies, but I think leaning on people that you love and trust is pretty important too. I remember when I got sent down for the first time after my rookie year, my dad surprised me in Syracuse, just drove up, you know, kind of showed up at the ballpark, and I was like, damn, man. So anyways, he kind of pet me up. And then when I finally got back to Toledo, my, you know, future wife, girlfriend at the time, she just kept pumping me up, saying like, you're not as bad as you think you are, you know, like you're really good. You're almost always one of the better players on the field. You know, you just didn't perform great for a short amount of time. You know, you're going to get back there again. And trust me, in my mind, I didn't think I was ever going to see the big league field again. But, you know, a month later or so, I was back. And if it wouldn't have been for those people, I might have just buried myself. So I think it's important to listen to people that you trust, because they've been observing and they've been watching, your whole life. And I think it's important to trust them with what they see as well, and not let that negative self-talk, I guess, mute out their voices.
Saj, thanks so much, man. That is awesome.
I have one thing to say.
Austin, you want to add to that? Or do you have
I'm gonna add to one thing, and I'm gonna add on to my story that I just told.
Okay.
So the story that I forgot to add this. My train of thought was kind of bad. So when Coach Ronnie was there, he told me that I'm pretty sure one of y'all said this. I struck out one time because I just wanted to hit the ball so bad. I just wanted to hit the ball so bad that I ended up like swinging out all the ones that were like in the dirt and up high. And he was like, just relax and just wait on it. And then during the last inning I was up, it was right after I made a really bad I really didn't there's a hit grounder right before I went up to bat. There was a grounder hit to me and I fumbled it and the guy got on bag. We ended up, and then I was up to first bat and I was shaking and through nerves and I was really sad. And I just remember Coach Ronnie said, just relax and wait on it and you'll get it. And I did, and I hit it down the first baseman line.
There you go. Well, that's a great coach. Coach Ronnie Ortegon. He did the same thing for me too, Austin. I have a similar experience with Coach Ronnie Ortegon. Ronnie, do you want to add something to that?
I can't even remember I said that to you, Austin, but I'm glad I did. Yeah, the big thing that I was telling him during that game was, he was really working hard to control himself, clear his mind. And it's like, dude, just relax. It's okay. And, and he did. And, he takes things to heart, which is awesome. And he applies things in the middle of a game. So that I'm proud of him for the things that he does along those lines.
It's awesome. It's very cool. The influence that our coaches could be on us. But
Hey, Adam.
I forgot to add this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The girl that just speak, did you say you're in the Olympics for swimming? Because that's a milestone itself.
Thank you, Austin. I trained for the Olympics. I didn't end up qualifying.
Well, still, the fact that you made it that far, that's impressive.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And Mika, right now you're working hard at getting your master's in sports psychology. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
First year down.
So that's a whole nother challenge, right? The whole nother.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is awesome. But I want to go back to.
I think I think I got the name right, but Murray, did you have something you want to add?
I did real quick. Just briefly want to say thanks, Adam and Andy, for doing these. I tried to get my 7-year-old to listen. He was in for about the first 20 minutes, so he got a little out of it. But real quick, one thing that was key for me, I played baseball for a while, was just trusting the work that you put in beforehand. That plus some self-affirmations. I always use, I can do this. Yes, I can. But trusting that you put in the time, you put in the work to get yourself there, and falling back on that was huge for me.
Craig, great to see you, man.
Yeah, you as well.
Craig and I, we grew up playing Little League together.
We did.
Craig was always out on the field working with his dad all the time. I remember that.
Yeah.
Working harder than anybody else. And we got to play Little League, got to play high school together, and then Craig went to University of Michigan to pitch at the University of Michigan. And now, yeah. So Craig, great.
You can see it now. Craig Murray.
Yeah. Is that
Coach
Bob
Beaupre?
Yeah. How you doing?
Yep.
How you doing?
Find him. How I'm hanging in there. An old fart, but I still try to participate in whatever I can. I still go to all the football games, and I just and enjoying the conversation here. I certainly remember your tenure at South, and we had such a great team. It was a beautiful experience for me to retire on you guys.
You're a great coach. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Coach Bo.
Now, can I say something?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, the positive thinking, of course, everybody appreciates that. Always to stay as positive as we can and to try to eliminate whatever failure does occur. But we also have to understand the acceptance of who we are. I'm not a Willie Mays. Roger Hornsby told me I had a $50,000 arm when I was about a 14, 15-year-old. It was a bunch of BS, you know that. But it was certainly something that put the positive attitude into a young man. And this is the thing that is necessary. But also the acceptance. A couple years later, I realized that I couldn't throw through a paper sack. And so I was never going to be a good pitcher. But acceptance of who we are is important. And the courage to face that, to know that you, no, you're there. You can't be a 400 hitter if you're a 250 hitter. And I just, the courage to is important.
Coach, you gave me those 3 C's when I was a freshman in high school, and I still stick to them: confidence, courage, and concentration. And I always went back every step I took, from college to pro ball to the major leagues, and I always appreciate it. But I like what you said about acceptance, because you accept who you are, but you also accept the moment that you're in. I know a lot of people that are on tonight have been in big moments in their life that have been really stressful. I know personally there's been a lot of times where I'm up at bat where the game is on the line and you got to accept it. I remember the only walk-off home run I hit in the major leagues. I kept telling myself, enjoy this, enjoy it. And I swung at 2 strikes in a row. It was 0-2. I had 2 strikes on me, but I kept telling myself, enjoy this. And I accepted that moment. And before I knew it, he threw me another fastball and boom, home run with 2 strikes on me. But Coach Beaupre, that's awesome. Accept who you are. I just wanted to add, accept the moment. But Ben Pierce, I wanted to bring you in because you work with a lot of young, I know a lot of you guys work with a lot of young athletes, but kind of wanted to see what your input, what is, how you work with these players who are failing, how to kind of give them that extra boost to get over that gap,
Yeah, development is much different than what we're talking about, successes and failures regarding outcomes. But one of the things that I like to talk to my guys about, especially in my guys right now and my son are in the recruiting process, understanding what a success and failure is. Because you strike out making the last out of the game, or you walk a guy or a guy gets a hit off you, doesn't mean that was a failure. And because you swung at a ball and got a base hit doesn't mean it was a success. You could have had a bad swing. You could have swung at a pitch that wasn't a quality pitch. So, we try to really understand what is a success, what is a failure. And, I deal with a lot of college coaches and I speak to them, and they're not looking at your batting average. They're not looking at just your velo on the mound. They're looking at how you handle things and how you respond to them. What do you look like as an athlete? If you strike out 3 times, how did you handle yourself in the field? So the process and that reset that we talked about a month ago is huge, and being able to handle adversity. But having a success, dealing with success is not that easy either. You get yourself into a mode of where you're overconfident, and now you start doing things out of the norm, or you try to do something as a pitcher. You could be on the mound, hey, I just struck 2 guys out in a row, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm doing it, and I lose my concentration and my focus on what I want to do with a pitch, and I throw one down the middle, and all of a sudden it's out of the yard and everything changes. So I really try to keep them grounded and realize what their successes and failures are. We talk about false successes and false failures. Just because you got a base hit doesn't mean you did everything right. There's a time to coach it up. And we do that in between innings or after games. We try not to coach the kids during games on these things. We want them to learn how to handle them themselves.
Yeah. Well, could you tell like when a player is getting overconfident? Like you say, like, let's kind of like, or is it recognizable as a coach for you?
Yeah, I think, arrogance, there's a difference. I mean, when I pitched, I try to go back when I played, and that was many, many years ago. I don't recall having to deal with failure, and I obviously failed. I pitched 5 years in the minor leagues, that never made the big league. So obviously there was a ton of failure there, but I always felt that I was going to dominate every time out. And if I didn't dominate, oh, well, they got me this time. I never really felt that I let anybody down or failed. 20 years later, when I started to realize where I went wrong, I failed myself in how I handled things and how I approached and how I worked. But I didn't have the luxury of the things we have nowadays to keep you on track. And especially as a youth player, I mean, we played our regular leagues and went on to college if you were good enough, and that was that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Greg, I want to bring you into the conversation. Greg is the women's head coach at Oklahoma State University, and congratulations. You guys just won the Big 12, is that right?
Yeah. Just won last week. Yeah, that's exciting. I'm listening to all this. It's interesting because I had a whole list of things.
It went out again, Tara.
Okay. I think it's everything that I had written down, somebody's talked about, and in terms of the importance of body language, you talked about. Ronnie mentioned the thought of being one hit away, or we talked to our players about that, of just being, having the attitude of always being one shot away of playing well. And I think I hope I get this right. It was Ben that was just saying, talking about recruiting, and looking at when we recruit and we're watching players, everyone, when they're playing well, is going to have a great attitude. Everybody's, it's easy. It looks easy. It's easy for them. You learn more about somebody and more about a player when things aren't going well. And so when we're out recruiting, it's great to see them play their best golf, but it's probably just important for us to see them when they're not playing their best and how they react to things. And so, it's interesting. We had a girl on our team who played in the Augusta National Tournament, the weekend before the Masters, and she got in a playoff. There were 75 players, and she got in a playoff for the 30 last spot to play at Augusta National, the last round. And she won that playoff as one. There were 5 people, and she had to win it to get in. And they interviewed her, and they asked her, what'd you do to calm yourself down? And this girl's ranked number 5 in the world amateur rankings, and she said, I didn't try to calm myself down. I mean, it's just it's not. But what I did is I looked at it as an opportunity and enjoyed the moment. And because you get in those situations, and I mean, everyone's heart's racing and you're nervous, but to embrace it, it's really, you're not going to calm yourself down. We're all human. But she learned that, I'm going to take it for what it is, the situation, and look at it as an opportunity. And she ended up winning that playoff. And then the next day, at Augusta National, shot 69 was the low score when it moved up to 10th place. And so it's just a different mentality for somebody like that. Again, she's ranked in top 10 in the world. And, but we just, what we do after every tournament, we have a tournament evaluation sheet that we have them fill out. It's just 3 simple questions. What did I do well? What do I need to work on before the next tournament? What did I learn? Just for them to reflect on what they did, and whether, and want them to write things down. Think about, what did you do well, and yeah, there's some things that probably you can work on, but and there's a learning moment in all of those tournaments. And so we want them to talk about, but the last thing I'll add is, Adam, you talked about kids having fun, and before our players tee off, or when they tee off, in a tournament, I mean, that's the last thing I tell them. Have some fun out there. Not talking about going out and winning and doing it. Just go out and have some fun, let loose and let go. And so, but that's a little bit of just some things that we do and talk about.
Those are all great points. And I mean, the one that stood out was like, just enjoy the moment, right? I think that's if we could do that, if we could be in the moment, you won't have to worry about succeeding or failing, like just enjoy it. Don't worry about the result, right? Just kind of do the best in that moment.
Hey, Rosie, yeah. Building on that and just saying in a different way is, I have my guys are 2022 grads now, and this is their prime year for recruiting. And one of the things that I stress to these guys before we go into the season in June is don't let what happens this year define you. If it's defining you, you made a huge mistake. You need to see the bigger picture. And if they can't see the bigger picture, it's very hard to succeed.
That's a great point. You definitely have to have the long view, right? Because you're gonna have setbacks. It's not gonna go your way all the time. So but if you could, like, I don't know, webinars way back a while ago, I always said my vision, my long view was to play one day at Wrigley Field in Chicago. That's what always kept me coming back. I hit a $180 even in college summer league with a wood bat, because I couldn't hit with a wood bat, but I kept at it, and that long view of playing that one day, not just that year. I did it 2 years in a row too. You're like, oh man, this is tough, but I got through it because I had that mindset of getting to a destination. But Andy, I'm not sure if you want to add anything, any thoughts that you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's overcoming failure is really challenging, right? It depending on how much you let it get to you, right? And so I think what happens to a lot of players is it becomes so emotional because they let their thinking drive them down that dark hole, right? And when players do that, it becomes really difficult to get out, right? So like, hey, just have fun out there becomes really, really, really hard to just have fun out there. And so that's where, and I think it was said a few times that sticking to the process, right? Because sometimes it's just, you let yourself experience all this pressure and it means so much to you because of all the effort that you put into it. And then the game is on the line. It's a big game, right? Like you can let that really take you down a deep hole. And that's when the process becomes really important, right? All right, all that matters is my attention on this process that I know will work. And then you're able to not worry about all these other things, about the pressure. You're not worrying about the people in the stands or the scout watching you, right? Now all your attention is on the process, which I think having a process is one of the most important parts. So like real quick, working with soldiers, guys that are going to battle, and the biggest thing that they work on is they always have a plan, right? And with athletes, it should be the same way, is to have a plan how to deal with whatever situation you have coming up. So
yeah, there's no question. Andy, thank you. Does anybody else have anything or any experience that they had or anything they overcame? Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Oh yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what I was gonna say is something I've been trying to work on with my son, and I think it's been helping him, that I got from having conversations with Todd Stottlemyre about some of the work he did with Harvey Dorfman, because Todd was one of those really, emotional, kind of like volatile guys where a little bit of frustration could blow up into a huge inning, right? And so what he felt really was a breakthrough for him was the whole concept of like, as soon as this pitch leaves my hand, I don't have any control over what happens next. The only thing I have control over is the next pitch. Like, you know, when you're struggling and you go up to the plate and you're 0 for 10 and all you can think about is I'm 0 for 10, I better not go 0 for 11. Like, that's not gonna help you, you know? So like, that's where you see it spirals out of control when you're carrying all those past frustrations and failures with you instead of just focusing on like what's right there in front of you, you know?
Love it. I think it goes back to that control the controllables, right? Like I thought about,
Right.
like for me, like Mika said, like that compassion was really important, but controlling the controllables that's essential. I mean, Mika, I was actually thinking about the story you told me about when you started swimming, like the first time your open water swim, and you did not expect all these I guess all the swimmers to be like hitting you and like, and they're distracting you to just swim like you usually practice swimming, right? But you had to like find a way to get past those distractions and do what you knew how to do, right?
Yeah, that was a big, I started working with a mental skills coach when I started training for the Olympics. And I mean, I won't get into my whole story, but I didn't really have the like resume to justify training professionally. I just kind of went with it because I'm a big dreamer. But what I worked on a lot was, and that was something that he drove home with me all the time, was control the controllables, because I'm not a very physically intimidating person. And I'm also just like my personality, I'm not very aggressive, but I'm very competitive. So open water swimming is kind of like cycling in a Peloton, but obviously it's underwater. So there's no judge seeing what's going on underwater. So it's very aggressive, and people, you know, pull your legs and push you under and swim over you. And I broke a rib, someone elbowed me in the chest. And it's just like, it can be very aggressive. And I tried to be aggressive. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna throw some elbows, and and it did not work for me. It took way too much energy for me to swim and be like, now I'm gonna throw an elbow, and but what if I hurt her, you know? And I just finally I was like, that's not me. Like I can't control that person, but I can control myself. And like my plan is to conserve my energy and find that space where I can be successful and move away from, not everybody's throwing elbows. So it's like move away from that person and find like the spot where I can stay in control. Because it's so exhausting when you're constantly focused on things that are completely out of your control. It's just
Right.
draining.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Not that it completely reminds me, it made me think about in the book Mind Gym, is about like this, just controlling the controllables. There was a pitcher that couldn't pitch well because a manager that he loved from watching him on TV is always watching him. Now it's live and it's happening. And he said, look, I can't leave the game. The manager is not going to be able to leave the game. So you're going to have to be able to do this. So you got to be able to avoid that distraction or just accept it. Like we talked about before. I don't know. It just made me think about that story. Like there's so many different things you can't control. You got to find a way to do it. I don't know. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to say about.
I had a question, Adam.
Rose. Nope.
Mish, go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
Catherine, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
So when I went to Western Michigan, I was a pitcher, and I remember my freshman year, all I wanted to do was face the upperclassmen, and it was fall ball, and I gave up like 6 runs. It was awful, but as mad as I was, I feel like I was a little more persistent in saying that I wasn't going to accept that, and I just wanted to face them again. And so I just remember, you know, going up to my pitching coach and saying, the next time I pitch, can I face those guys again? You know, because I thought maybe that was going to be my chance. And
if I guess I didn't stick up for myself and be a little persistent, then I wasn't going to have another opportunity because I wasn't any like top prospect coming out of high school. And he allowed me to, and I did much better. You know, and I can kind of, I guess, relate that to my wife now, but when I started dating her in college, she told me that she wanted to break up with me. And I said, no, you're not. Like, that's just not going to happen. And so I just feel like maybe there was a persistent, like every time, I mean, I failed so much. I got sent up and down probably 14 times from minor leagues to the big leagues. But all I wanted to do is I wanted that ball again. I just wanted to pitch. And then my second comment, which this is going to be interesting, and I wonder if anybody has something to say about this, but I coach a 9U, my son's 9U baseball team. In our last game, you know, they threw so many balls, right? And there was one kid who got to pitch 2 innings because he was throwing strikes. And so after the game, I told him, I said, okay, you know, who pitched the best today? And it was Cooper. All right, Cooper, why did you pitch the best? You know, and the kid would try to answer, well, because his release point was here and it wasn't back here. And the rest of us, no, that's not, you know. And it was like somebody finally said, because he threw strikes. You're right. He threw strikes. So then we had a practice last night and we didn't do anything about pitching, but they played catch together. They're throwing it together. Okay, we got to throw from one person to the other. It's the same as when you're a pitcher, you got to throw it to the catcher, right? And so afterwards, we do kind of that knights in shining armor, and we just had like a little talk. And one of the boys said, "Well, Coach, what about pitching? Like, what are we going to do about pitching? Because we weren't any good." I said, "You guys are great pitchers. I got all the confidence in you guys that you guys are going to pitch." And I just kind of wonder from them hearing that. And then another kid was like, "You pitched in the major leagues. How do you think that we were that good?" So I think for me, just giving them the confidence, hey, you guys are going to be awesome. You know, I wonder what goes through their little minds to think, what the heck? We didn't even do anything about pitching. We stunk last time, but coach thought we were good. We're going to be all right.
It's got to open up a whole nother world, man. Like fireworks.
I'd like to, I just can't want to keep growing with them and see what they think.
I love it, man. Mitch, that's cool. And going back to that persistence, love that too, because that's definitely something you need to overcome that failure, right? My dad would always use the word tenacity. That's just a way of being persistent. It always stuck with me. That tenacity to get back up again. But Catherine.
I had a couple questions.
Okay.
One, my son Derek Wilson, you coached him with the Lions. Remember Phil Cardis' team, Derek. So my question is more when he's pitching. Like the other day we were in a tournament, and it was the 4th ranked team in the state, and he was cruising like strikeout. And it came to the final inning, and he said, and the coach was like, "Oh, you're going back out there?" And he's like, "No, I send so and so." And he just kind of stopped. And I said, "What was the problem?" He said he's afraid to let everybody down. And I'm like, you were cruising. And the other kid that went out there ended up giving up the game. So I'm like, I don't know how to get him past that. He's fear of letting everybody down. And that's Derek has he's a really good ball player. So
great ball player.
Yeah. And so I'm like, what do I do? And the other question was, do you know of any sports psychologists that deal with kids in the Phoenix area? Because I mean, if he gets to a point, there's a lot of pressure on him just because he's already got scouts looking at him, even though he's 12, he's already got scouts at the professional level already talking about him. And so he's kind of like, that's a lot of pressure. You're only 12, I don't want to have him feel like he has to be perfect at all times. I mean, you're playing a game. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun. I want to keep it fun. When it doesn't become fun anymore, I don't want a 12-year-old to feel like they're going to work when they're going to a baseball game. You know what I mean? So what are your pointers for that? So
I think I'll chime in real quick? I think the coach has to put him in and just say, go in.
Yeah.
And just put him in the position. And then once he succeeds, that'll be a huge stepping stone. But you have to just go into that spot or into that last inning.
You know, I
then-
will say that he hurt his arm like a year ago, and he went through physical therapy for like 3 months, and his arm is completely 100% good. But I noticed every time he's out there pitching, if somebody starts hitting off him or something, he'll start grabbing that arm and it act like it hurts. And it's like, it's only when someone has success off of him that and I'm like, I think it all ties down to fear of, I don't know if it's the arm thing or if it's what, but that's I think part of the problem. I don't know. But I've had physical therapy. I already looked at him. His arm is 100% healed and it's fine. So, but he will grab it if anybody gets a hit off of him or something. And he's a really good pitcher. He doesn't usually give up much. So, I don't know what to do with him. So,
I don't know if others can say the same thing, but I work with a lot of kids also and do the same thing.
They do the same thing.
Yeah. So.
I don't know what to do with them.
There's a sports psychologist on tonight, Bryce, right? You do sports psychology, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any insight to help Catherine with her son, Derek?
I mean, I'll help where I can. It's tough, with just a sprinkle of information, but it sounds like to me from a very distant view that there's still a lot of, I guess, baggage tied to that arm injury, whatever it was. It sounds like a lot of that is still kind of hanging on. So it's almost become like a crutch, sort of when things go south, instead of, like we were talking earlier, instead of getting super angry or frustrated with himself, his outlet is kind of to go back to that injury is almost like an excuse, even if he knows it's fully there, fully healthy, and he's confident going in. When stuff gets hectic, that's when everything kind of comes out of the weeds. And so any type of baggage that he might still be pulling along from all the PT he went through, all the, trauma of a real injury, that now it's kind of starting to surface again when times get tough. So I think one of the best, like the first step to kind of getting through all that is, sadly, you kind of have to revisit that injury and kind of talk back through it. What was it like when you were injured? What was the support around you like? What was it like, being on the bench, having to watch instead of being there? And that can kind of help cultivate some of that gratitude that now, like, hey, I'm healthy, I get to play, I'm 100%, and kind of turn some of that negative emotional damage with it into a little bit more of gratitude that, hey, I still get to play. And hopefully it'll kind of alleviate him using that as a crutch, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Absolutely.
No, that's great, Bryce. Thank you so much. Ben, I see you keep on shaking your head like you've seen this before. Like you got some wisdom over there.
Of course, yeah. I run an organization that has kids all the way from 10U all the way up to 17U. So we're dealing with a variety. But these kids that have success, they want to come up with excuses a lot. And you just have to let them fail. They'll grow out of that. I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, they'll move on, and as they get around more kids that have confidence, it'll build their own. And I do a lot of coaching seminars as well, and talk to youth coaches that do not have the experience that a lot of these guys do. They can't put the outcome of the team or the outcome of a game in front of the development of a kid. And a lot of times this happens. These guys that coach these youth teams want to win so bad that they forget about the kids themselves, and they have to really focus on that. It's hard. I mean, we do it. I mean, with all these perfect game championships and PBR now, everybody wants to be a champion, but none of that matters in the development of a kid. We have to look at that first.
Another idea too is like asking him what questions, like what's the worst part about letting the team down, and what's so bad if they get a hit, right?
Right.
What's the worst part about this? And oftentimes they'll come to the conclusion that so I'll lose the game. So like the ultimate thing, right, is that they lose the game. And it's like, well, what's so bad about that? And let them release it like, hey, your worst fear isn't that bad, right? As far as the letting the team down type of thinking. I mean, obviously the arm, that might be a different issue, but finding out, getting to the root of it, like, all right, what's so bad about that? And then letting him come to the conclusion that, hey, it's actually not that bad. So.
Those are all.
Thank you. That's all helpful.
Yeah. I like all those ideas. I mean, just letting him fail, put him out there in the situation. It's kind of it's kind of, I guess, maybe tough love a little bit at a young age, whatever you want to call it. But just put him out there.
Yeah, I think his coaches, like Coach Webb, has been a little bit. He was like, do you want to go back out? I don't, maybe not tell him, do you want to? Just send him out there is what you're saying. I think they're giving him too much option, or to, not ask him. Just hey, you're out there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not my choice. I'm in the stands. I can't tell him, get out there.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think the other part too is that there are, I mean, all the coaches on here will attest to this, that there's a lot of injury with youth players. So like, you don't necessarily want to say like, oh, he's faking it. And some kids do, like that is a thing, but at the other portion is you don't want him to get hurt again because it's never too much. So,
well, that's where the fear was,
there's a
because I'm like,
possibility.
is he really hurt or isn't he? And it seems to be more ego tied, because like the other day, he'd only pitched 34 pitches, 29 for strikes, had mowed everybody down. 3 days later, he pitched 84 pitches, did fine, no problems, no pain. So it's not pain. I think it's all in the head. It's mental toughness, I think.
Yeah, you go the opposite direction. I have kids at the youth age, or if you're going to show me that you're not 100%, I'm taking you out. I'm going to go on to get you out of the game. And then if you want to tell me you're all right after I was okay, well, then you need to change the way that your appearance on the mound. And if you're going to show me that you're injured, I'm going to take you out, no questions asked.
Well, he showed no appearance of being injured that's why I was surprised. He didn't go back out that last inning. And I asked him why, and he's like, well, I told him to just put Kian out. I was done. I didn't want to make and he was kind of bumbling around, but I think the bottom line was he didn't want to give up. He didn't want to be the one to give up the game, because it was tied 3-3. And he felt like, because it was the last inning, he knew that if he didn't go out there and perform, we would have lost. And it means a lot to him, but I'm like, I'm never hard on him like that. I'm never hard on him. So I don't know.
Hey, Adam. Maybe just kind of another perspective is just in a situation like that, is just kind of helping them understand that, it's a good thing that you're feeling that way because of the performance that you've had up to that point. You've put yourself in that position because of what you've done so well up to that point, and again, just to learn to embrace that. I will say that just as a college coach, I mean, we have, a number of our players that don't ever talk about seeing a trainer up until the point that we get to a golf tournament, and then they can't find a trainer fast enough. But I mean, in terms of that situation right there, is with this young man, I mean, he obviously has done some great things up to that point, and learning how to embrace that. And you might give up a run or something like that, but I mean, look at it in the positive, what you've done all the way up to that point, and again, I mean, failing is a way to learn, and it's not always a bad thing if you look at it the right way.
Love it, Greg. Thank you. I used to do the same thing. I don't need to go to the trainer room until it's too late. Then your pride gets the best of you. But, I know Mish was the same way. Mish never went to the training room. Just a tough mother. But anyway, I know it's getting late out there on the East Coast. And I'm just gonna, I know a lot of people have already left, but appreciate you guys sticking around. And I always love doing this because I always learn a ton. I always take a ton of notes down. But it's exciting, and we look forward to doing it again. We'll probably do it. We'll I don't know. We'll probably do it within another month or so, and then have a different topic or whatnot. And anyway, but if anybody else has anything else to say, if not, we'll just sign off, and appreciate y'all sticking around and hanging out tonight. All right. You guys have a good evening.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you,
Pat.